I'd like to welcome everybody again to another class of the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program Teacher Certification course. And if you're still standing, you can be seated, please. And if you're at home, go ahead and be seated too. That would be great. Okay. So before we really get started here, I just wanted to mention that we mentioned it in opening and closing, but our next class will be on Sunday the 26th. Sunday the 26th at 5:30 p.m. And Chris should be teaching. If we don't change things up, he should be teaching on Sunday the 26th at 5:30 p.m. Okay? So just to let you know that right up front. And also for those of you that are online, whether you have a phone or a computer, whatever device you have, you should be able to go up to the top and find, might have to do a little searching on it, but you should be able to find the drop-down menu that will allow you to print either the whole book that we're working out of or at least the lesson that we're working on, and you can go back and look at other books that we've covered too. And we're winding up this section of the 5 of these particular units, and I think it's been really great. It's taken a little while. It's been great though, and you know, we go back and we talk about all the different steps, the basic steps along the way that has brought us to this point where we're at right now. And we appreciate everybody being with us too. So we are in the responsibility unit, and we ended up last week, I believe, on page, we were going to be starting on page 112, if I remember correctly. Got this right here. 112. And so just a little brief review that we always try to do. We've been talking about excuse me, we've been talking about incarceration. Let's see if I can get a little cough drop here. We've been talking about incarceration and, you know, finding out a little bit about what we need to know about prisons. If we didn't know anything about it, we're finding out something about it. If we knew too much about it, well, we already knew anyway. So, but that's what we're doing. We're talking about crime in society, society's response to crime, and we've gotten to this point of juvenile delinquents and some of the causes, some of the consequences that come from being a juvenile delinquent, or, you know, we used to call them juvies. You know, you go to juvie, it was a big deal if you went, you know, oh yeah, he went to juvie, you know, so that was like you were big and bad or something if you went to juvie. That's juvenile hall or juvenile detention, and so a juvenile delinquent, you're a juvie. So, but it's not a great deal by any means. You know, your reputation is already getting soured at a very young age, and it carries with you. You know, it really does. It becomes part of your persona, part of what you are. And, you know, from a little bit of experience, and some of the others of you here tonight, I know I've talked to, and some of you had experiences dealing with the juvenile justice system, okay? So, now on page 109, we did talk about the consequences. We talked about punishing, and what these prisons are set up for. They're set up to punish. They're not set up to do any correction. They punish. And that's why even the guards or staff members, when someone does something they don't like, then they put them with Bubba over in cell number 1, you know, and they punish them. That's what they do. It's punishment, punishment, punishment. They punish them in every way that they can, and to take total control and not have any problems. They think that's going to keep problems from occurring, and in some cases it does in the immediate situation. But it doesn't change the heart and mind like learning about peace does, and learning why you shouldn't be doing those things that you were doing, and that what got you into that situation. We talked about the different types of juvenile detention, whether it be a jail, a juvenile prison, the camps and ranches and so forth, and some of the downfalls of these things. We talked about peer pressure, some of the things that lead into the actions that, excuse me, that some youth have taken that got them to that point where they're at. These camps and ranches we saw where, I mean, we just had a handful of them that showed the problems that arise there. You know, they have, they're not all set up exactly the same, but I know many of the homes and ranches and so forth were set up with a basically a family structure. They had a house mom and a house dad, and then they had the boys and the girls and everything. Some of them had them in the same household. Some of them had it separated. But, you know, that leads to things also. And it led to a lot of abuse from staff, too. I mean, you get a man overseeing young women, or you get, these days, a lot with women overseeing young men. We see that taking place even in the schools where there's so much sexual abuse that takes place, and there's so many teachers and guards and everything, and all these things. They can't control themselves, but they're put in situations where it would be hard for anybody, excuse me, to control themselves. Should keep the men and the boys separated from the women and the girls, and that's just the bottom line. They're still going to find ways to get around that. But so we talked about these things and how it leads to making a child's life even worse, where it was supposed to be something supposedly to help and to help straighten them out and so forth. And not to say that it didn't help some along the way. There might be some that took it to heart and went through such hell and agony that they decided to make a change in their life, and then they started really seeking peace and wanted to change their heart and mind. We looked at the statistics and the type of crimes that are being involved with young people, and some of the things that you could do instead of going out and committing crime, ways to have fun and so forth. And some of them, you know, you might say they're a little bit corny or something, but excuse me for just a minute. Starting a business together or doing something like that, mowing lawns, learning how to fix cars, all these things that we talked about, you know, of things that people could use and put their energies to work at instead of getting involved in crime. And some of the things that we talked about along the way too was I wanted to everything that gets you to that point. You know, once you're incarcerated, it's too late. But what got you to that point? You can go back and think about it, and you can start out right now. If you haven't gotten involved in these things, or even if you have, you can change now. You can replace your thoughts with positive thoughts. Instead of being a negative person, you can start being a positive person. That's one of the biggest things that you can do. If you learn to change your attitude, so that you're not a negative, pessimistic person, and you're positive instead, you'll find that goes a very long way with staying out of trouble and staying on the right side of the law, staying on the right side of people in general, of being someone that people look forward to being around instead of, oh no, here he comes again, you know. Being a positive person really helps out a lot in everything you do. You start looking at situations, you start looking at problems that arise and looking at it and start thinking about a possible solution instead of focusing on the negatives, you know. Something looks hard, hey, it might be, but, you know, stop and look around, clear your mind, and look at every possibility to accomplish whatever goal it is you're wanting to accomplish. And that's being positive instead of negative and just throwing your hands up in the air. Tonight we're going to go ahead and turn over to, well, first let's look at the lesson plan and make sure we're on the right page, so to speak. And forgive me for the occasional interruption of coughing here. These allergies are really something. in this area. Okay, so we are actually in that area of page 112 and 113 that's really not listed in the lesson plan, though it's part of it, and it carries on from Straight Talk on page 111, and it carries through to what we're going to get into next, and this just completes it really. And so go ahead and turn over to page 112. And if you're there on page 112, the question at the top of the page, and this is the question really, and it doesn't matter if it's juvenile or adult or what, but do prisons or correctional institutions, say that with a little laugh there, correctional institutions, help to stop crime and teach people to be morally responsible? Well, judge for yourself. Being in prison is not a walk in the park. Prison life is dangerous and unpredictable. Once a person serves time, you would also think he would have learned his lesson and dedicate himself to never committing another crime. The reality, however, is that 65% of those released from prison commit more crimes and return to prison within a short period of time, and that's called recidivism. And it is an excellent way to measure how well the prison system is working in regards to rehabilitating its inmates. Although 35% of inmates do not return to prison once they have served their time, 65% is too large of a number to ignore. Now, last class we had a video, and some mentioned that they really didn't hear the first 30 or 45 seconds of it. I guess the volume was down or something, or maybe on, excuse me, maybe online it was associated with that. But nevertheless, it still applies in what we're talking about now, and I think there were some very important points that were talked about in that video. So we're going to go ahead and watch it again. It's about a 6-minute video. We're going to watch it again now. If you could go ahead and start the video.
On any given night in America, nearly 50,000 youth under the age of 18 are confined in facilities away from home, 2/3 of which are in correctional-style facilities. According to the nonprofit Prison Policy Initiative, this number has decreased over the last 20 years. But the United States still incarcerates the most children in the world. Sarah Hinger is a senior staff attorney with the ACLU's Racial Justice Program.
The United States far outpaces other countries in detaining and otherwise criminalizing young people. And that has, again, similar to the adult system, a disparate impact on youth of color who are disproportionately represented in contact with the criminal justice system.
But why is that? And why are so many youths arrested in the first place? Michael Corriero is a former New York State Supreme Court justice.
At the turn of the 19th century, we created the world's first juvenile justice system. The idea behind that was that as a society, we had a moral obligation to recognize the developmental differences of children as compared to adults.
But the idea of rehabilitation through the prison system isn't working. In 2012, the Department of Justice began tracking formerly incarcerated people of all ages. The latest report, released in July, found that of individuals arrested at age 17 or younger, 71% have been rearrested within 3 years of their release. That number climbed to 80% by year 5. The impact on an adolescent's access to education is part of the issue. In 2015, the Council of State Governments found 1 in 3 incarcerated youth were either receiving or needed special education services. The report also found more than half of incarcerated youth were behind grade level in reading and math, and around 60% had repeated a grade. The educational obstacles after prison begin before the first arrest, says Hinger, when school disciplinarians initially put a child in contact with the justice system.
The school-to-prison pipeline refers to the process whereby school systems address young people through discipline and criminalization, and effectively place them on a pipeline to continuing and more extensive contact with the justice system.
And that can cause long-term harm.
It ends up undermining any sort of positive modeling or reinforcement. It further removes the child's attachment to school, alienating them and pushing them forward towards more negative influences.
And even if an adolescent is innocent when arrested, the length of time required to post bail could lead to a suspension or expulsion from school.
So if a young person came into the system and bail was set and they were unable to make bail for 2 weeks or so, or someone was willing to put up the bail, that young person's education would be disrupted to the extent that very often they were not permitted back into the very schools that they were attending while they were arrested.
Children do attend school while incarcerated, and according to a 2013 Justice Department report, inmates of any age who participate in correctional education programs have 43% lower odds of returning to prison than those who do not. But the negative effects of traveling through the justice system and falling behind in school can follow youth well beyond their release. Formerly incarcerated people are twice as likely not to have a high school diploma. Their unemployment rate? 27%. According to the Prison Policy Initiative, when children are pushed away from education and into the justice system, it leaves them unable to compete in a job market that needs skilled workers. This is especially true if the individual did not receive youthful offender status. That status, Corriero says, means they could
come out of this experience without a permanent criminal record, which is so crucial and important for young people in terms of their capacity to eventually enter into the adult world, if you will, with a clear slate in terms of opportunity.
This is what drove Judge Corriero and his colleagues to set up and preside over the Manhattan Youth Park, a court exclusively designed to deal with the cases of kids between 13 and 15 and their co-defendants, to channel youth cases to alternatives to incarceration programs.
Those who sat in that part were expected to understand the vicissitudes of adolescence, were expected to develop an interactive relationship, if you will, with the young people that appeared before. And what we tried to do was to develop a process that helped us to channel out of the system those children that we thought we could work with by linking them to alternative to incarceration programs.
The youth part eventually became a model for mobilizing social services for young people under a judge's watch, because, Corriero says,
the dominant policy behind prosecuting children should be that of rehabilitation and not a punitive one.
Young people are going through a period of cognitive development, which means not only are they likely to change and mature out of any challenging or problematic behavior, but also that as a product of where they are in life, their reasoning and decision-making skills are different, and they need different things. Youth are just not primed to respond as well to punitive consequences and punishments or negative incentives.
Instead, Hinger argues the key is to hold youth responsible for their behavior outside of the prison system if possible, to stop the negative impacts on education and recidivism before they start.
When effective interventions are made, there are dramatic reductions in negative consequences and problem behaviors.
For the PBS NewsHour, I'm Tim McPhillips.
That was PBS, and I agree with a lot of what they said on there. And I might add that Rikers Island itself actually had the peaceful solution being taught there for some years in the youth facility, as a matter of fact. One of our great peaceful solution teachers was able to spend a lot of time there. Well, he actually worked there, and he was able to have many classes that brought forth this peaceful solution program. And so that's a great thing, you know, in a city as big as New York, and in somewhere like Rikers Island. Everybody's heard of Rikers Island before, you know. It's synonymous with violence and so forth, and so they got some peace there for a while. And I've got another article here we're going to go through. It's from the Sentencing Project, but let's talk about this for just a minute. Going back to page 112, and remembering what these people said in that. She mentioned, remember the developmental age, that teens have not even developed completely yet to where they can make rational decisions based upon the consequences and and everything taking place in their lives until they're much older. And where, if we look back, if everyone in this room and watching looks back, and it might even have occurred with you yourself, but when you were younger, if you got in a little bit of trouble, and maybe a lot of trouble, you can look back and see that as you got a little bit older, you might have actually worked your way out of it and decided, I don't want to do this anymore. This is kind of foolish. I need to get on in my life and so forth. Not everybody does, but a lot of people do. And that's what she was saying in there, is that, along the way, hey, as we get older, we put away some of that foolishness and we move on with life, start families and realize we have a responsibility and so forth. And so that takes place with a lot. Not everyone, but with a lot. And so keeping that in mind, and again, with the Peaceful Solution, the author of the Peaceful Solution told us that many times, is that the brain is not totally developed. So you can't hold them, accountable for all their life for something, that when they haven't been taught and they haven't even reached that point. But going back to page 112, it says halfway on the page, some experts believe that prisons do not rehabilitate the majority of their inmates. They feel that prisons, and notice it says some experts, they feel that prisons are a breeding ground for violence and disease. Inmates are confined to overcrowded cells and very little effort is made to change their behavior. Experts also agree that the way modern prisons are set up, inmates learn from each other how to gain more skills in the criminal behavior, and we know that to be true too. As a result, inmates usually leave prison worse than they went in. And who would agree with that? I mean, I see a lot of heads shaking right now that yes. For instance, thieves have boasted that while in prison they met with other prisoners and shared information on how to become better thieves. Before we get into this article, which is entitled Why Youth Incarceration Fails, and it's an updated review of the evidence, which this was done in 2023. So we're going from about 2005-ish, 2004, right in there, on to 2023 with this article when we get to it. Can anything else be done? Well, because the prison system has not been very successful in reducing crime, other measures to deal with crime and reduce overcrowding in prisons have been implemented. Excuse me. Front door solutions. This intervention was designed to help offenders take responsibility for their crimes. For example, they must make restitution to the victim for any loss or injuries that they may have suffered as a result of the crime. And if the perpetrator is unemployed or on drugs, he must find a job and stop using drugs. If he can comply with these conditions, then he can avoid serving time or have his sentence reduced. Now, one of the things this does, too, is even though it's forcing the situation, just like the stop using drugs, it's forcing that to some degree. But if you can get somebody to stop doing something for a period of time, then there is a possibility you can keep them from not doing it again with the proper training and education. Not with everybody, but with a lot of people, okay? It took a few times for me, but I remembered one thing when the man, the former Supreme Court judge, I believe is who it was, Carrero, Judge Carrero, when he was talking about a young man or a young person, how devastating it can be to get arrested, not be able to get out on bond. This is if you're an adult or a young person, okay? But as a young person, not be able to get out on bond, very important deal, to kind of continue with your life until you go to court, and so there you sit, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month, whatever, while your life is on hold on whatever was taking place. Now think of it as an adult. And I see some of you shaking your heads too. Excuse me again. Wow. As an adult, you've got a family. You're the only one with an income. You get arrested. You don't get out on bond in the next couple of days. Guess what? Your job is out the door, buddy. And even if you did get out and they find out, maybe you're blasted in the local newspaper or something, all over the front page, and you get back to work, and the boss says, well, you know, don't worry about coming back here. You know, we'll see you. Go find a different job. You know. And so it could be very life-changing whether you were guilty or not of whatever the crime was. But even if you were guilty of it, it can be very life-changing. Even if it wasn't that big of a crime, it could have been something that people would call relatively small, or it could have been something large. But whatever the case, if you don't get out on bond, you got a problem. And I remember as a young man, that was one of the things that was pushed, is that I already knew if you didn't get out on bond, you could forget it. You know, you were probably going to prison if you didn't get out on bond. That was a great indicator right there. You could see the ones that got out on bond and were able to go and continue on and keep their job and everything, and then come back to court and they show up and they have a job and everything's going well, you know. Then you have the person that wasn't able to get bonded out, and they don't have a job, they're in jail, they've got a sour attitude, they've lost their family, they've lost their job, they've lost, I mean, you know, you name it, everything got repoed, they got evicted out of their house and everything, and they've got to go to court with a total different attitude. Remember that thing we were talking about attitude, having a positive attitude or a negative attitude? Well, you know, how it would be really tough to not have a negative attitude in that situation, right? You lose everything and you're sitting there just waiting. So we're learning, though, how to have a positive attitude in everything that we do and whatever comes our way. But yeah, it's tough. That'd be a tough situation right there. And anybody that's been in that situation knows that what I'm saying is true. If you get bonded out, you probably got a 75% better opportunity not to go to prison than if you didn't get bonded out and you went straight from county jail to court and then off to prison because you were someone that didn't have anybody looking out for you, anybody watching your back or anything. So knowing that is a very important thing. But anyways, the system is set up against people that don't have money or don't somehow have access to someone kind of watching out for them and everything. It's just absolutely set up against them. Even when you get a ticket driving down the road, if you are the son of a senator or the mayor of the town or this or that, you have a great opportunity of probably not getting a ticket from the local police, you know. Whereas if you're what they might say a local troublemaker or somebody that doesn't have a prominent mom or dad or, you know, from the poor side of town or maybe the mobile home park down the road, you don't have no shot, man. You're probably going to get a ticket, you know, because they know they're not going to have to worry about going to court and everything. But anyway, not to get into all that. That's just another part of the system that really is messed up and doesn't work. So boot camp is another thing. It says, can anything else be done? The boot camps, okay? Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and read this. Boot camp is similar to basic training in the military. It basically targets young people and teaches through strict physical training and hard labor the importance of making responsible choices. The Georgia Correctional Institute established the first boot camp in 1983, and by 1989, 32 U.S. states were operating 56 boot camps. That seems like a very late time. I really, in this article, that's what it says, but I remember there being similar things way back when I was a young person. In fact, I went to one of them for a minute, and it was very strict. And they operated just as if it were boot camp in the military, basic training. For any of you who've been in the military, this place operated like that with these young people. It might have even been harder, I don't know. But although these interventions have had some success, neither has significantly reduced the rate of crime. And why? Well, the problem with prisons, boot camps, front door solutions, and all that is that society intervenes after the crime has been committed. The lives of the victims and perpetrators have already been changed forever, just like we were talking about. They've lost everything, you know. It's too late. Our current system deals with the lack of moral responsibility after the damage has already been done, not beforehand. What do you think would be a better way to deal with crime in society? I might add that these programs don't actually change the heart and mind either. A person has to be ready for that change. They have to be wanting to make that change. And then they have to have the right information to make that change. And that's where the peaceful solution steps in. We have the right information. When that person gets to that point where, maybe they've tried everything or they're sick of their entire life and they want to change, they're ready, then we're there and we have that information for them. Now, we can introduce it to them beforehand, but until a person's ready, they're not really going to take hold of it. So they've got to be ready for it. And when a person goes through all those things and loses everything, sometimes they're ready for a change, and other times they're ready to take revenge upon the system and everybody that did that to them, And I'm not trying to be mean about that attitude of them having about the revenge of people that did that to them, but nobody did it to them really. They did it to themselves, and then those people were already in place to make their lives worse by them making the choices that put them there in front of those people. So it still falls back on the individual themselves. And it says to write a brief description of what you think could be done, excuse me, to deter crime. You can do that, and if you're in a classroom situation where you could share some of it, that would be great. But did you know that every year in the United States alone, over 18,000 people are murdered? There's also over 32,000 rapes, 300,000 homes and businesses are vandalized. And no amount of punishment or intervention can change the outcome after the crime has already been committed and the damage done. That's an important point right there. It's not going to, putting someone in jail is not going to change what occurred. It's already taken place, Now, what can we do to keep it from taking place again? But let's go back before it all took place and start making changes in their lives then. Start making changes, and this is what they were talking about on the PBS on the PBS show. There is they were talking about trying to make some changes beforehand, before somebody's life changed so drastically, to where they make the right decisions, even with their undeveloped mind, Well, we're going to turn to page 114, but I am going to get into this article a little bit too. It's from the Sentencing Project, and it's called Why Youth Incarceration Fails, an Updated Review of the Evidence. Excuse me. Incarcerating youth undermines public safety, damages young people's physical and mental health. You got that? Impedes their educational and career success, and often exposes them to abuse, which we saw some of those articles last class in even some of the intervention programs where the abuse takes place. You got people that are lacking great morals themselves that are in these systems and over these programs, and a lot of times it comes down to money. They're in it to make money. A lot of the halfway houses, they're in it to make money. They know how much they can make on every one of those beds, and each and every one of the inmates that come in, and they know they have some control over them, because if they don't do exactly what they're told, it's back to prison. So it's a money-making system, and that's just the beast. I mean, it's how it is. It's all about money. The peaceful solution's not interested in your money, and that's one of the big differences right there. In fact, most of the time, the peaceful solution is given absolutely free. Everyone that I know that has been in this program for many, many years, and teachers of the program, they've never asked for for any compensation. Okay, so on this article, this is very interesting. It says, though the number of youth confined nationwide has declined significantly over the past 2 decades, our country still incarcerates far too many young people. It does so despite overwhelming evidence showing that incarceration is an ineffective strategy. Now get that. Here is an executive summary of this whole thing in this sentencing project, which, they probably make money too, but incarceration is an ineffective strategy for steering youth away from delinquent behavior, and that high rates of youth incarceration do not improve public safety. Incarceration harms young people's physical and mental health, making public health and safety actually worse, because they're now training this person to be a worse individual than they were before, and actually bringing it about by affecting them in the way they infect them. It impedes their educational and career success and often exposes them to abuse, and the use of confinement is plagued by severe racial and ethnic disparities. This publication summarizes the evidence documenting the serious problems associated with the youth justice system. Here's some high points. That's what we're going to talk about. Incarceration produces counterproductive outcomes. So here's one thing. Incarceration does not reduce delinquent behavior. It makes it worse. State-level data on recidivism constantly shows that youth who are released from correctional confinement experience high rates of rearrest and new adjudications in juvenile court or convictions in adult court. And because they make new friends, they get incarcerated and make new friends, and now they got more connections on the outside to continue in whatever path it was they chose, unless, again, they've decided to make a change in their life. Studies that track youth outcomes into adulthood have found that an alarming share of young people incarcerated in youth correctional facilities are later arrested, convicted, and incarcerated as adults. And without going into detail, there's a very high rate of that takes place. Research also shows that the initial decision to incarcerate youth in secure detention facilities, a jail, a fence around it, prison, pending their court hearings, again, not being able to get out on bond, it substantially increases the odds that they will become further involved in the justice system. Remember that? If you don't get bonded out, you're going to jail. It's just such a high probability. Pre-trial detention increases the odds that the youth will be placed in some kind of custody, and then it goes on about that. Another high point is that incarceration impedes young people's success in education and employment. I'm sorry. A number of studies show that incarceration makes it less likely that young people will graduate high school. I'm here to tell you that's true. The school re-enrollment rates of youth returning from juvenile facilities are very low. And you can forget about college after that point. It really does lower the thoughts of the youth in getting in college in the first place, and it also lowers the possibility of qualifying to get in college. I remember going to a job one time, and to anybody who knows me around here knows that I like cars, and it's not hidden from anyone. I've always liked working on cars. I see someone laughing in here. They're thinking I should be working on them more, probably, but I've always enjoyed working on cars, selling cars, buying cars, anything to do with cars. I always enjoyed it. Racing cars, all that stuff. But when I was young and got in a little bit of trouble, when I was able to then go out and get a job, I went to a place and they were like, man, they just couldn't even believe they even had me working there. I mean, it was a gas station, but they did a lot of mechanical work. And I was a young man. I was 16, 17, and of course, one of those situations where I couldn't go back to school because they didn't want me there anymore. So I went to work, and I went to work there, and they were so glad to have me there, and we just were pumping cars in and out of there and all. And after a little bit of time, the sheriff comes by and I see him over there talking to the owner of the company, and they're pointing at me. Next thing I know, guess what? I don't have a job. And it was because of that reputation thing. Now, here was a situation where this was great for me, great for the owner of the company, great for everybody, and we have to have somebody get involved and open their mouth and start, pointing the fingers and everything. Okay, I had done nothing to these people at all, but that was enough to end the whole situation. Now, that replays over and over and over again. And I see some heads shaking up and down now. It might have occurred to some people in this room, probably did, because it's such a commonplace thing. No matter what you do and how well you do it, there's always going to be somebody that brings up that past thing that took place, whether you were guilty of it or not. So, and that's what we're talking about, juveniles. I mean, I was a juvenile, and yet people were still willing to do this. And so, talk about something that will turn someone away from society and the way things are set up, and turn them into someone that kind of skirts the issues and breaks the law all the time and everything. That can do it. If a person doesn't have the right knowledge and attitude when those things take place, they're going to go with the flow. Okay, you won't let me do it the right way, I'm going to go ahead and do it the wrong way, and then they end up back in jail again. And so, the cycle continues. And that, again, is the way it's designed. It's the beast. So, incarceration does lasting damage to young people's health and well-being. Absolutely. Suicidal thoughts, depression, drug use, drinking, abusing alcohol, physical challenges. Juvenile facilities are rife with maltreatment and abuse, which the articles that we showed last class actually pointed some of that out. These facilities that are supposed to be there to help youth and help guide them into a correct way of life, actually, the people there, in a lot of them, not all, okay, not everyone's bad, but the people that are in a lot of these facilities aren't controlling themselves, and they have another idea of things, and then they in turn make that youth's life worse and worse. And then again, that youth looks at it and says, well, there they are. It looks like everybody in authority is against me, so why should I even try? And they get back on the bandwagon again, Anybody been there before, or know anyone who's been there before? I mean, that's how it goes down. So, racial and ethnic disparities in incarceration are vast and unjust. Black youth and other youth of color are incarcerated in detention centers at far higher rates than their white peers. Many studies have found that these disparities at detentions are driven, at least in part, by biased decision-making against youth of color. Youth of color are also incarcerated disproportionately at the correctional phase of the juvenile court process. Now, why incarceration fails? And I think we all agree on that. I mean, I surely do agree with a lot of things on this report. That's why I brought it. And this is part of, as a teacher of the Peaceful Solution. Now I'm getting a little bit heavy into it in these pages because I've been there. I know exactly what this is talking about. I know firsthand experience, and so do a lot of other people that are right now watching online and also sitting in this room. We know how it takes place. We know what's going on. And we know the challenges that are involved. We might not have had all the knowledge of why, back then, but now we have that knowledge, and we can look at it and see how it took place, and then see what we might be able to do to help solve the situation. And that's why we're here. That's why we're here learning the Peaceful Solution and learning how to be teachers of the Peaceful Solution so that we can put a stop to this crap right here. That's why we're here, okay? If you're not here for that reason, to put a stop to things like this right here, you might be here for the wrong reason. We want to put a stop to all these things taking place. Not only this problem with the juvenile justice system, but the adult justice system with neighbors, the way they conduct each other themselves with one another, with businesses and how workers and supervisors and owners and everything, how they conduct themselves and interact with each other, with government officials. No longer would it be so rife with corrupt people and corrupt judges and people out to make money. What is money going to do for you when you die? You know, nothing at all. But why incarceration fails? Part 2 of this report reviews the recent research on adolescent brain development and trauma. Again, you know, it's not fully developed, and this is kind of new. I don't think they were really focusing on this back, 40 years ago. Brain immaturity fuels delinquency. Scientists have confirmed that the brain does not fully mature until age 25, and you know, with each person it could be a little bit different, but in that area. And this lack of brain maturity makes law-breaking and other risky behaviors more common during adolescence. Now, some of you may be sitting there thinking, well, that's ridiculous. I was very mature at 19 or 18 or whatever. I knew exactly what I was going to do. I knew my path. I had it all set up and ready to go, and I've stuck with it all the way. Hey, great for you, okay? You're the exception to this rule, okay? No problem. No problem at all, okay? Don't worry about it, you know? So this is for the vast majority. So this lack of brain maturity makes law-breaking and other risky behavior more common. And it shows as the brain develops, the vast majority of them will grow out of this. 63% never return to court on delinquency charges because they're growing out of it. Not because of the jail time they did, or not because of the charges that they got, not because of any of that at all. It's because they grew out of it. Their brain developed to a point where they can make a rational decision about their life and their future. And they got a little bit of knowledge probably along the way too, and we're there to give them a lot of knowledge on it. But that's without any, forget the jail, forget everything, forget any kind of program or anything else. Without any of it, 63% move on and grow out of it, okay? That's pretty strong. So, since that's the figures, I would think that by getting too involved in this whole youth justice system, it might actually reduce those numbers a little bit. Increased maturity is tied to desistance from delinquency. New research also makes increasingly clear that young people's ability to desist from delinquent behavior is tied to their progress in developing psychosocial maturity. Now, this is one of the things too that takes place in a young person's mind, especially if in that severe period of growth and development of the brain, if they get involved heavily in drugs during that time of their life, guess what's not taking place? That development. So not only is their brain not matured until they're 25, if they get involved in the drugs and that social norm, that social path, they're not going to develop even till further on in life. And that's what we see with young people that got involved. Maybe it started out smoking marijuana and they got involved in some other things, but their brain just stops right there. Their social development stops right there. They don't know really how to conduct themselves with other people as they get a little bit older because it kind of stopped and they're still a child. So it includes the abilities to control impulses, delay gratification, weigh the consequences of actions, look at other people's perspective, and resist peer pressure. These are things that don't develop when this is taking place in youth. Research finds that incarceration slows young people's psychological maturation. Exactly the opposite of what's needed to foster positive behavior. Isn't that amazing? How it's just the opposite. So the solution is not only to let them get more mature and start growing out of this and present to them introduce to them this great moral character that the peaceful solution introduces into their life. So it's not only that, but this jail time and this justice system actually slows that healing process down. It's crazy. Just the opposite. And these are things that nobody ever cared about. You know why? Because they wanted to punish. There's so much of an attitude of revenge and punishment out there. Punish, punish, punish. You did that, you're going to go do this now, you know? And that punishment, crime and punishment, man. It's not crime and correction, it's crime and punishment. That's what we got going on right now today. If you're being a part of that, you need to break out of that and realize it doesn't work. I mean, it really, really doesn't work. You might be able to punish them for a minute and get them to stop doing something for a minute, but when your back is turned, that heart has not changed. Early childhood trauma. This is something we haven't even talked about yet. Often feeds delinquency in adolescence. Okay? So studies find that youth that have become involved in this system are several more times more likely than other youth to have suffered traumatic experiences. Think about it. Did you have a parent die when you were young? Did your parents get divorced when you were young, very young? Did you lose a family member when you were very young? Were you abused when you were very young? Were you in a car accident and had severe health issues after that when you were very young? All these things are hitting a young person that doesn't even have that developed mind yet. And no one's there to really help. They don't know how to handle this. They haven't been taught how to control themselves, how to be positive instead of negative. I know, again, from experience, I know exactly what it's like. Because I did suffer severe trauma when I was young. And, no one told me, hey, you're suffering this trauma right now. Let's make sure you get some proper education and everything. Get that mind working right before you end up in jail and everything. I'm like, my life is over. Go tell someone else, I mean, no one was telling me that, but all the people that were trying to tell me, oh, it's going to be all right and all this and everything, I'm like, what do you know about it being all right? I'm sitting here and I no longer have that very thing that I need to grow. Everyone should have a father figure and a mother figure in their life. Everybody should have that. So incarceration can re-traumatize the youth, make them go through these things again. The thing that twisted them off the first time anyway. They can make them relive this again. I mean, it's horrible. So then they're talking to people that have been through experiences like they themselves have suffered, and now they have a new friend. And now the peer pressure's there, and now they're more likely to go along with this new friend on whatever they want to do rather than try to do something to change their life. And again, I know I can speak for myself, is that I looked at other people like, you don't know what I'm going through. You haven't been through what I'm going through, I mean, why would I listen to you? Well, no one ever told me why I should listen to them, Reducing incarceration through alternatives and policy and practice reforms, So a lot of the alternatives, well, let me just read it. Part 3 of this report reviews the research documenting programs and policies that reduce incarceration in ways that lessen delinquent behavior and improve young people's well-being. So they do have some programs out there that they're trying to adjust the policies. So there's community alternatives to confinement. There's youth advocate programs. They've got a lot of abuse taking place in there too. Credible messengers is an approach where adults with experience in the system from the same neighborhoods that the youth live in can kind of mentor them and help them. Then you've got some other programs led by some neighborhoods that try to have some recreational programs and so forth set up for the youth in their particular neighborhood. And all these community interventions, they do seem to help a little bit, and they only cost a small fraction of what it costs to incarcerate. But yet there's still those people that, they were hurt, or the youth did something to them, and they are wanting revenge. They want to see some punishment. In dealing with young people in general, I've seen that that's something that's hard to grow out of. If someone does something to you, even though we know in the peaceful solution that everybody deserves respect, if somebody steps on your toes, you don't have to turn around and step on theirs. If someone hits you, you don't have to hit them. Someone yells at you, you don't have to yell at them. But how often it takes place, not only with youth, but with adults too, because we're learning. But with youth, it's you can sit there and look at it, because they expect, when they come and tell the teacher something that took place, so-and-so said this about me and threw something at me, and then, ask, well, what did you do? And, maybe they did something, maybe they didn't. If they did the right thing, then, of course, you give them praise on how they conducted themselves. And then if they turn around and hit the person back or whatever, then, again, you talk with them and give them correction through education. You don't have to give them punishment. First of all, you didn't even see what originally took place, and you didn't see probably what took place then. And a lot of times that's where, I'm kind of getting off track here on this a little bit, but a lot of times that's where the bullying, it seems that the bully always wins. And the reason it seems that way is because here's the bully, he does something that exacts a reaction out of the victim. And then when so all of a sudden the teacher's hearing something, they hear a noise and they look outside and all they see is the victim punching the bully. And then the bully says, he hit me, And it's terrible that it takes place that way, but that's how it goes down many times. And so then you're sitting there talking to the victim, and they're saying, yeah, but it wasn't me. He hit me first. Well, you can point out to them that that's a great reason not to hit back, is because usually what the teacher sees is the second part of the deal, okay? And that's what takes place everywhere. I mean, that's how it goes. So learning how to conduct ourselves on the front end is a much better way to handle things. And it always brings peace. If you're dealing with a bully and they can't get you riled up, they can't get you to get involved in their accusations and so forth, and you're just beyond all that, you're way above the game, because the peaceful solution isn't a game. See, the game players that think they're king of the game, they might be. But see, this is what they don't know. They don't know the peaceful solution, so they can't possibly be king of the peaceful solution, because it's not a game. There is no king involved in the peaceful solution on this. We all work together on this thing. And so that's what's neat about the peaceful solution, is the game players can't stand it because it's not a game. So how can they play? It's a lifelong process. It's a life-changing thing. There's no hitch to it. There's no hack to it. You can't hack it and be walking around here. It just doesn't work that way. Everybody can see through the bully. Everybody can see through the person that doesn't really do these things. And we all have improvement, don't get me wrong. Some of you right now looking at me saying, yeah, I saw you doing this the other day. Well, it might be true, because I'm not perfect, okay? But I'm working at this. And that's the thing. People who are working at the peaceful solution, whether you be a teacher, a student, or what have you, even if you're a student, you're a teacher, because people are watching what you do. And just remember, you're not perfect, and neither is anybody else right now. But we're working towards it. We're working to where we can live with each other, work with each other, and deal with each other and interact in a very respectful way without causing harm to one another or ourselves. And I'm going to leave it on that note. We are We didn't get that far, but now let me see if there's just anything I need to. No, we pretty much made it through that. That article was very interesting to me because it had so many high points in it that are absolutely true and go along with the peaceful solution. So we're going to leave it right there. We're still over there on page 114 whenever we come back. And Chris will be taking over. He'll probably do a bit of a review to bring everybody back up to date and then continue on. And we look forward to everybody being here again, and thank you for coming. And those of you that are watching online and being part of this, we thank you for wanting to have peace in your life and to bring peace to the entire world. So appreciate it. See you next time.